Did he do it? If you've enjoyed our recent Arcadia restoration series, you'll have seen h0ffman produced the first game for the Arcadia Super Select system in over 30 years. This is the longer format interview from that series, so please sit back and enjoy, and if you haven't already seen the full series, go and check that out too.
It started on the Thursday, I think, when I saw a little post on social media from Neil, it kind of, in our Discord, we've got a little TTE Discord where we talk about cracking and coding and all this kind of stuff. And very quickly, it caused a bit of a buzz in there because basically a whole group of us were all chatting in the Discord and then investigating how this thing actually worked. So the first thing we discovered is that it's fully emulated in WinUAE. So you can get all of the ROMs from various sites. You can obviously obtain the ROMs and you can emulate them as if it's an Arcadia system, which in itself gives you a massive leg up because you're able to run debugs, investigate, set breakpoints, and do all this other kind of investigative stuff. I also messaged Tony, who produces WinUAE emulator, and he gave me a bunch of information about how it works. So kind of at a top level, although it's an Amiga 500, the sideboard that plugs into it provides obviously a game ROM and a BIOS ROM. Now that's kind of like the major difference when you're comparing it to anything else that runs on the Amiga, because anything else runs in RAM, which is random access memory. So you can change that and you'd load it off a floppy disk. So you've got 880K of floppy disk over there. So, that's kind of the two major differences between the two systems. So the first thing that we actually had to crack was one of the ROMs on the board has got its bit order shuffled. So if you just read the ROM as normal, none of the data is in the right order. So I had to create a system where I could descramble that, modify the code or modify the data, and it to just change a little something just to get the process kind of up and running, and then rescramble it back, and then insert that into a zip file to then run into WinUAE just to see if even if you're just changing the name of the game is going to work. Because once you're able to change something, then you've got a reversible process of I can descramble that, I can change that, and then I can scramble that back in. I think the way it works is each game board has a different order of bit shuffling. So if you just take another game board and flash it with a load of ROMs, then one of the main ROMs, which is at the start, isn't going to work. And then on top of that, there's checksums for every single ROM as well. But they're just stored in a little table, and it's about 5 lines of code to verify that checksum and calculate it. So it's very easy to bypass that. That's kind of the first step. Once you're able to just modify an existing game ROM and then get it to verify. So we just put TTE rules as the game name, and then it verified it and passed it and ran the ROM. So after that, it was then the next step of producing kind of just a bare bones ROM with just a tiny piece of code, like a hello world, effectively. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that is in that ROM. So there's a game header, there's other header information. It's kind of having to disassemble all of these little bits. It's not a lot, but it's enough. Just like you have to have like a set structure in the ROM. Otherwise, the Arcadia just throws the ROM out and says, well, I can't play that. That's no good. So once that first shell effectively was built with just a tiny piece of code that just put a load of random colors on the screen, then I knew I had something that I could build and then run my own code on it. So that's when things do start to get a little tricky. Because obviously, you can throw any code on it, that's fine. But again, like that whole thing of it's based on ROM rather than RAM. Then obviously, Seekanoid, for example, uses 512K of chip RAM, 512K of fast RAM or slow RAM on a 500. So I'm already using 1 meg of RAM, but the Arcadia's only got 512K. So, but it has 1 meg of ROM. So anything like code and physical data, anything that doesn't use the custom chips can all sit on the ROM. But that very quickly runs out because a lot of the data has to remain uncompressed for it to be useful in the ROM. So the ROM ends up being this power struggle between like, how much RAM have I got? How can I shrink my RAM usage? And how much ROM have I got? How can I like move stuff into there and use it straight from there, or so this whole kind of power struggle between where in memory stuff's going to actually go. I think the biggest thing that saved space was the music. The sample data for the music wasn't compressed in the original game at all. It was just on disk, and because it loads it really quickly then. But on the arcade, you'll notice whenever it changes music, there'll be like a short pause on the black screen, and then then the music will change, because that's then had to be compressed quite heavily to be able to fit that into the ROM, because you can't have that all in chip RAM at the same time. Like a lot of Amiga coders don't really work with ROMs. So you find that there's a few routines that I was using, like, for example, the CD32 controller code that was in there, which is just the joystick controller code, basically, has a variable right next to its code. So that'll obviously read the joystick and then write some value next to itself. But that's in ROM, so it writes nothing and then reads nothing. But it doesn't create an exception or an error or anything. It just goes, I'm doing nothing and I'm reading nothing back. But it becomes quite problematic to debug, because you're like, why isn't that working? There's no errors being thrown. It's just basically trying to write to an unwritable area of memory. And the CPU goes, well, I'll do that, but I'm not going to tell you anything's wrong. So there were certain things about the Arcadia that you kind of had to adhere to a point. So obviously it has credits. So we support the fact that you can put money in and your credits will go up. But the amount of RAM I was using meant that as soon as the game started, everything that the Arcadia knows about credits is basically wiped out. So we have to kind of back up what credits you've already put in. And then it kind of traps you in Sequenoid until you run out of credits, and then just leave the game alone for a bit. So it's not the most seamless, but we're trying to find like the best compromise within a short space of time to get it working nicely. And the truth of the matter is, it'll probably be on free play the whole time anyway. I think it took 4 days in total. It was pretty intense. I have to give a shout out to all the TT guys, Xeron, JC, and Manimatron, and obviously Tony from WinUAE, because they're all hacking away at it and providing support and encouragement. It was really fun to do. Because it's that perfect mix of, there's some investigation, kind of some kind of copy protection, a bit of cracking, bit of disassembly. And then once that part had been done quite quickly, it's like, well, how do we cram a game in very quickly? So yeah, it was a lot of fun.